Happy to be here, guys. We'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards, so I'm just looking forward to getting you guys interested in what we do in brain surgery.
Lionel, glad you could make it. Can I get you a drink?
Yeah, something soft. I'm driving.
Can you guys hear?
Parking's an absolute nightmare around here, isn't it? Have to reverse into the tiniest of spaces. Still, I managed it. I mean, parking's not exactly brain surgery, is it? And I should know.
Why is that? Are you a doctor?
Careful, not a doctor. I'm a brain surgeon. Big difference. Big difference. Yeah, I actually know a joke about this. What's the difference between a doctor and a brain surgeon? One's not exactly brain surgery. The other is brain surgery. What do you guys do?
I'm an accountant.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I could do with an accountant. Filling in those tax forms can get really confusing, can't it? Still, it's not exactly brain surgery, is it? I mean, brain surgery, believe me, is very complex. Are you an accountant too?
No, I work for a charity.
Oh, that's a very selfless job, isn't it? I really admire you. I don't think I could ever do what you do. I say that because it's emotionally draining, not because it's hard. I mean, it's not exactly brain surgery, is it? Which, as a brain surgeon, is what I do.
Lionel, here's your drink. Lionel's a brain surgeon, you know. Yeah, you mentioned it. Oh, Jeff, they keep you late at the Space Centre.
As always.
This food round. Have you met Lionel?
No, hello, Lionel.
So, Jeff, how do you earn a crust?
Well, I'm a scientist. I work mainly with rockets. It's pretty tough work. What do you do?
Why, I don't mean to boast, but I'm a brain surgeon.
Brain surgery? Not exactly rocket science, is it?
That's our little fun to start off with. Henry Marsh is a neurosurgeon, a British neurosurgeon. They tend to be a little bit more serious. And he actually is the opposite. He writes a book called Do No Harm, where he talks about how difficult it is to essentially make it through life, because we kill people. Things go wrong. No matter, the best surgeons in the world, people die in our hands, sometimes because of things we can't prevent, and sometimes because of mistakes that we make. And he talks about how basically to stay sane through a lifetime of doing the best that you can to help people, but sometimes things go wrong. It's a really serious book, but in the end, he kind of talks about how we all carry a small graveyard around inside of us, and this is the price that we pay for the privilege of being able to take care of people. So I actually, when people ask me what I do, I'm like, well, I work at a hospital. I don't like talking about it because I don't want it to become the topic of conversation. But I do like talking about what we're going to be talking about today, technology, and how we're using advanced technologies, including putting our egos aside and borrowing from other areas, space technology, military technology, Silicon Valley, trying to make what we do safer. First brain surgery, or at least in the modern era, was in 1885 in England. This is before they had any imaging of the brain, no CT scans, no MRIs. They essentially knew this was a young guy, 25 years old, had weakness of his left arm and hand and shaking, which were seizures. They were able to tell just by symptoms on animal models that he had a tumor on the right side of his brain. They even know where in the right side of his brain it was. And they were able to, this is before anesthesia, this is before antibiotics, and this is before antiseptic technique. They essentially kind of put some chloroform over his mouth to knock him out for a little while. Essentially with a drill, drilled 3 small holes in his head, knocked out the piece of bone, and then were able to successfully remove, this is their drawings from that first ever brain tumor surgery, were able to successfully remove the tumor. The patient was the same, meaning they didn't make him worse neurologically. His arm was still weak, but they didn't make that worse. So it was deemed a success because they were able to remove the tumor. Unfortunately, he died a month later because we didn't have any antibiotics, so the wound became infected and he died. But this was a breakthrough because it was the first time in human history that we were able to successfully intervene on the brain, successfully meaning the surgery itself didn't cause them new problems in the brain, and that it was kind of proposed that with better postoperative conditions, it'd have long-lasting benefit. And about 25, 30 years later, penicillin, the first antibiotic, came online, and we started to learn how to wash our hands before surgery. And ultimately, progressively, things have gotten better. So, 140 years ago, we've come kind of a long way. One of the things I'm involved with is developing the technologies to make these operations less and less invasive. So, the typical operations where we take off half the skull are because we used to not be able to be that precise. Now we're progressively decreasing the size of the openings of the skulls, ultimately to try to work through natural orifices like the nose or behind the ear, so that it's less invasive. So some of the technologies we use for that stuff, again, we use these every day, so we learn how to make them better on a day-by-day basis. A couple of areas where we've kind of, for a long time, our egos, again, neurosurgical egos got in the way of progress. Obstetricians, the OB-GYN doctors have been using ultrasound in the abdomen for 75 years to look at the belly. Everyone that gets pregnant gets an ultrasound of the belly, and week by week or month by month, we look at the development. Well, neurosurgeons think, well, yeah, that's great for the OB-GYN doctors, but we're operating on the brain here, so, we don't really, that's not useful for us. In reality, we're totally wrong. When we use the ultrasound on the surface of the brain during surgery, it allows us to see in excellent detail the little vessels and things we're trying to avoid, as well as the tumor that we're trying to target. Endoscopy is another great example of that. Again, general surgeons, orthopedic surgeons have been using laparoscopic techniques to remove the appendix, the gallbladder, 50 years or more. Neurosurgeons, big egos, said, well, that's great for the general surgery guys, but it's not exactly brain surgery. So they didn't pick up the techniques that were developed in other aspects of medicine, and so it slowed us down. And then, about 15 years ago, a couple of neurosurgeons started to say, hey, this might actually be really well suited for our ability to not have to open the brain, but rather introduce the scope into the nose and be able to see up along the base of the brain or behind the ear to see at the back of the brain. So now this is a picture of the optic chiasm, which is where the visual pathways from each eye cross over to the other side of the brain. And this is an endoscopic image in 3D, 4K, and these little vessels are 1/10 of a millimeter in diameter. Nowhere else in the entire body, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, even most of the brain, does a vessel that small matter. But here, this small vessel will probably, if I cauterize it or cut it, it'll lead to a missing spot in your vision. This little one, which here is 1/4 of a millimeter maybe, if I damage that vessel 1/4 of a millimeter, the patient will have they'll be like a horse with blinders on. So a tiny, tiny vessel of that size, which we would not be able to see to get to that pituitary. Before we had the endoscope, we used to have to cut the nose off the face and move it to the side to be able to get the pituitary. And now we do it without any cutting at all. We drive the endoscope up, which is about the diameter of a pencil, 4 millimeters, up into the nose. And I'm going to show a video of how we do that a little later. So borrowing from other fields of technology is kind of one of the themes that we talk about here, and including, you get a lot of physicians that talk about their fear of technology or becoming dependent on technology, and I'll talk about why I think that's stupid. But I like to start with problems. What problems are we trying to solve here? We as physicians have problems that we want to help our patients, and we want to do no harm. We want to get better and better at it. And so I love working with engineers because they solve problems. What they do all day is solve problems. And if I can give them a real world problem that I'm having either in diagnosing a patient or in the operating room, they'll come back to me with a solution. It may not be what I thought they were going to do, but it will solve the problem. So the first problem is that there's never been a way for us to practice an operation on a patient. We call it the practice of medicine because each day we go to work, we are practicing our skills on live human beings who there's consequences for making mistakes in. Sometimes people actually call it the craft of medicine, like it's witchcraft or wizardry. And again, there's always been this kind of secretive aspect of keeping what we do under our cloak so that, the mystery that we're not really gods or wizards or, that this up here on a pedestal won't be revealed. And a lot of doctors still now fear this. They don't want data exposed. They don't want the outcomes followed. In reality, when we follow, our outcomes from myself, tracking every movement of my hand, and if I watch 100 of my surgeries and AI analyzes it, I can see that, typically my hand starts to drift down like this a little bit, so I want to know about that in order to correct it. The best analogy I use is, if you guys have ever shot a gun, there's if you traditionally shoot down to the left, it's known that you're anticipating the recoil in advance. That's known from shooting thousands and thousands and thousands of times. We can use the same data analytics to optimize surgical performance now, but we never were able to do that before. And so we were never able to practice operations. So Chris Ahmad is an orthopedic surgeon for the New York Yankees. He's the one that's done A-Rod's arm and all of the famous, Derek Jeter operated on all these guys. He's the surgeon that operates on the major athletes that you would have ever heard of. And he wrote a book called Skill, which he compares the skills of the athletes he treats and the preparation and the training to the skills of surgeons who prepare and train in similar ways. One of the things he talks about, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. There's this, how many of you guys have ever heard of Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers? Okay, so you know the concept of supposedly after 10,000 hours, you're supposed to be expert at something, right? Playing piano. And in many cases that's true, but you guys probably haven't driven for 10,000 hours yet, but we all have. And we're definitely not expert at it after the 10,000 hours. And arguably, you could say that you get worse over time at some things, even with limitless hours of experience. And the reason is, it's not just practice or time that makes you better, it's time with intention to improve. So you have to go at something, look at it critically, make a mistake, and then go back and say, okay, how could I have done that better or differently? So, Michael Jordan, 6 times world champion, I think the best athlete that ever was lived and ever will be. Chris Ahmad talks about how there's a lot of similarities between surgeons and elite athletes, and the major difference is that Michael Jordan was by himself, even when he had got 5 world championships on Saturdays, throwing the free throws by himself, when there was nothing at stake other than looking critically at his skills and making himself better. And that's the difference. As surgeons, we don't have that ability. I can't practice an operation 1,000 times before I do it on you. At least I couldn't until we stole virtual reality from military and space flight and brought it into brain surgery. So we used to have to look at these 2-dimensional black and white images, this is an MRI of a patient's brain, and you got to kind of look at it. Okay, this is how the MRI comes off of the images come off of the scanner, and this is how they were always looked at. Some of you may have seen things like this. Well, this is upside down and backwards, so the right side of the patient is actually on the left side of the screen, and their right ear is here, and you got to do a lot of imagining to get from this to what the surgeon sees is this. This is a kind of 3-dimensional model of the brain, which you have to rotate into a specific position, and then look at all of the structures, the tumor, the blood vessels that supply the tumor. I can see even where the patient's, the motor control for their arm, their hand. This is a similar location to that original patient that, in 1885. So the tumor in the same location. I pulled it up for a reference there because in 140 years we've come from, essentially blindly knocking the holes in the skull to now being able to have a 3-dimensional map of this patient's individual brain. And we got from here to here by stealing the technology from the Israeli Defense Force. We had 2 Israeli Air Force officers who designed the flight simulator technology for F-16s and adopted it over, rather than simulating a mission flying through Tel Aviv, now we can take these slices, recreate a 3-dimensional model, and we can fly through the brain. So we do that in order to not practice the surgery kind of in a general, I understand the anatomy, but in this specific patient, I can do my simulation in VR, put on the Oculus headset, and actually practice the operation. So, this is our ability to see through, and not just see kind of on the surface. If I want to kind of go layers in, go deeper, to see actually through and around, to see where the target is and where the critical structures are. So, before I became a neurosurgeon, I taught neuroanatomy. So I always thought these black and white images, like when I became a surgeon, I'm like, really? This is how I have to prepare for surgery? I look at it like it's like a flip book, like the old school Mickey Mouse, like cartoons. I was shocked that this was the best we could do to prepare for surgery. And then a couple of years later, a rep who used to sell me all other kinds of stuff, and I didn't even really like. He was always trying to sell me something. Came in and he showed me this technology, and this is it's called surgical theater, and it allows us to create 3-dimensional models and then practice the operation in VR before we do it. This was patient number 1, the first time I ever tried this technology. This was a 40-year-old artist that was blind in the left eye because he got shot in the face with an arrow when he was a child. So all he had is his right eye, and he was losing vision in his right eye because of the tumor in green. Well, based on when I looked at the 2D images before I did the simulation, I said, okay, I think we can get at this through the eyebrow. We're going to make a little incision in your eyebrow and sneak under the brain and get there. Well, when I actually simulated the operation, when I put on the VR headset and I was able to see in this patient my line of sight, I realized that, okay, a hole in the skull the size of a quarter, sneak underneath the brain, the tumor is in green here, the optic nerve for his right eye is blue. And what I realized was I could see most of the tumor, but what I didn't see in the 2-dimensional imaging was this tiny little bit of tumor right there I was not going to be able to get to from my originally planned approach. Rather than making that mistake in the patient, I made it in a VR simulation of the patient, and I said, you know what, let's try a different approach, go through the side of the head, so instead of this like this, a totally different approach, and from plan B, similar quarter-size opening in the skull, this green tumor, I can see that little tongue that's hanging down and was able to get to the tumor in the simulation using plan B. Again, rather than make that mistake in a patient, and once I'm there, I'm stuck with it, I can't redo it, I would have either damaged his optic nerve and made him blind in his only eye, or left tumor behind and he would have had to have radiation as a follow-up. Instead, because of the ability to practice beforehand, when there was nothing at stake, I was able to use that to improve my skills and help this patient get a better outcome. So I was sold on, after using this on one patient, that this is going to sometimes change the approach that we use for surgery. And in fact, this has been studied. So taking attending level surgeons, experienced surgeons, and having them make the plans using traditional two-dimensional imaging, and then having them make a surgical plan using virtual reality simulation like we did here, leads to a change in the surgical plan almost a quarter of the time. If you think about that a different way, almost 25% of the time we might be doing the wrong operation on the patient if we don't practice or simulate first. That's really powerful. That was done at Mount Sinai in New York. It's also been repeated here at Hoag and at Stanford. So just if you think about how powerful that is maybe 1 in 4 patients might be having a suboptimal operation if the surgeon's not simulating first. I know if it's my daughter's 11, no chance you're touching her brain or actually any part of her without doing a simulation first, because you don't know what you don't know. And once we're in there in surgery, we're stuck with the view that we have. So this is really powerful, we published this in 2016, so 8 years ago. Still, probably only 5% of surgeons in the country are practicing and preparing for surgery this way. That's how much or how slow physicians' medicine are to adopt technology. But they think there are surgeons that don't even use any kind of navigation. They just put the hand on the head, usually I have to drill the hole right by my first knuckle. I'm like, well, that's assuming that every human being in the world has the same size head. If you're using your hand as a measuring tool, it's just total nonsense. But again, it's because of ego. If you've done 1,000 of them, you can do them all right. And that's actually, it goes against what Chris Ahmad talks about, is that you have to practice with the intention to improve. Once you think you already know everything, you're not going to learn anymore. Your brain shuts off to learning. So there's a concept in meditation, Buddhism, called beginner's mind. So if you approach everything with this idea that, what can I learn from this? What do I have to learn here? There's always something new we can learn. So this is the old way. Before we had these kind of technologies, we used to have to take off half the skull in order to get to the same kind of tumor in the same location. So this patient had that operation, half the front of the skull. We put it back on. Well, when you put it back on, the bone flap, even though it's hard and bone, it's dead bone, so it gets infected a lot of the time. In this case, the bone flap got infected. We had to take it out. And this patient is now left with this for several months until we can 3D print a replacement for their skull to put it back together in the end. I hate doing this kind of operation. I think that it's not back in 1885, but it's like 1920s. But this is still the way that it's done in the majority of the country. This is why privileged to be here in Orange County, where the community and Hoag is really special to allow us to offer cutting-edge technologies. So now, instead of going through the front of the skull, we can take out the same tumor, but within the eyebrow, an incision hidden in the eyebrow. And I kind of look at it like, well, the old way and the new way, and which would you prefer? And I always make the joke, here in Newport Beach, it's a lot about cosmetics, so people care a lot about the cosmetic outcome, but it's difficult even to tell which eye we operated on. It's hard to see the scar in her eyebrow, and yet she had the same type of tumor as this guy did here with this big scar across the top of her head. So the ability to be precise and accurate and be able to predict the line of sight allows us to be much less invasive and progressively, it's not just that it's cosmetically better, that this big incision, they're going to have more pain medication. They're going to have a bigger risk of infection. They're going to have to be in the hospital longer. They're going to have more blood loss. So decreasing towards less and less invasive approaches is better for the patients as well. So this is a pituitary surgery done through the nose. The whole space you're seeing across, I do about 100 of these operations a year. This is looking at the pituitary gland and a tumor over it. The whole field is 1 inch, so 1 square inch, so what you're seeing here. And on either side is the carotid artery and the optic nerves above. So in 1 square inch, if I go a couple of millimeters to either side, I'll cut the artery and they'll die. And now I'm starting to peel the pituitary gland, which is yellow, versus the tumor, and I don't know if you can see the color difference in gray. So we cut a little bit of the edge of the pituitary gland out, and this tumor is inside the pituitary gland. So as we kind of cut that away, which we can remove about 1/3 of the pituitary gland without affecting its hormonal function, we start to be able to see the difference. So the kind of more colorful orangish yellow pituitary gland above and the grayish purplish tumor below. And what we want to do is be able to separate the tumor below from the pituitary gland above. And we want this kind of to maintain this kind of smooth capsule as we pull it down away from the pituitary gland. It's growing inside the gland. You can see it kind of peeling down there on these little strands that we have to kind of release. This is 4 hours of surgery cut down into 2 minutes. So just to kind of, not bore everybody, but this is about a golf ball sized tumor, expanding the space of the pituitary. You can see the right carotid artery kind of, like it's a little bit difficult on the screen, but right carotid artery is here. There's more pituitary gland kind of sitting up like a cap on top. And then we peel it off of the floor. It sits in a seat called the sella, which is Latin for seat. We're peeling it up and away. And then once we've pulled it all away, we can pull the tumor out in a single piece. And then we pull it out through the nose. And now we're inspecting the space. This is left carotid artery here, right carotid artery here, pituitary gland above. We look to see whether we've caused any bleeding, make sure there's no leakage of brain fluid, spinal fluid down into the space. And this patient's cured. So we take it out. That will definitely never come back. We do that. That's the most common operation I do, about 100 of those a year. And I love it. It's fun because it's particularly enjoyable because they're benign tumors. So if we can get the whole thing out, we can cure them. Some other tumors that we do surgery on are more aggressive, more malignant, and they get lots of surgery, but ultimately they end up dying from the disease because we haven't solved certain aspects of the disease. If we get time, we'll talk about how we're working on that as well. Next problem. So problem statement number 2. Patients don't understand medical images. I look at this. This is an MRI of the pituitary tumor. Here's the pituitary tumor, just we looked at right there. I described them. Does anybody know what this is? Has anybody heard of a Rorschach test? Yes. Yeah, so this is an ink blot Rorschach test. They used to use them in psychology, psychiatry. Like if you think this is a bat or a wolf, then it tells me something about your pathology. I don't know anything beyond that. But to me, this doesn't really look this much different from this. And this is an MRI of the brain, which I'm supposed to be able to use. And then I'm supposed to be able to tell you. Imagine you walk into my office and I tell you you have a brain tumor. It's probably the scariest day of your life. And then I show you this picture. I'm like, yeah, you can see the tumor is this little area that's a little more black, and the pituitary gland is this kind of gray area. And the patients are like, wah, wah, wah. They don't have any idea what you're saying, and they're scared. So there's a fear of the unknown. Now, instead of looking at this, my 11-year-old daughter looks at this like, yeah, the green thing's the tumor, right? So green thing's the tumor, purple thing is the pituitary gland, blue is the optic nerves. And in 10 seconds, I can take away their fear of the unknown, right? You very, very easily go from here to here. Same images, no additional imaging required. We just build a 3-dimensional model. In the moment I'm talking to patients, I tell people that surgery is the easy part. It's mechanical. It's almost like meditation. I'm just sitting there doing something very small. If you like to paint or draw or play, if you're a musician, you get into the zone. We have the same thing in surgery. We get into the zone, and it doesn't matter what's going on. I'm focused on this. It's talking to people about their disease and their process that's really the challenge. And at the moment when I'm telling them they have a brain tumor or a pituitary tumor, they're scared. I can't take that away. I can't take out the tumor right then, but at least they have the fear of the problem and the fear of the unknown. At least in the first moment, I can take away the fear of the unknown by helping them to understand better. I always say the average American has a 9th grade health literacy level. So you think about that. We want to get them pretty rapidly to an associate's degree in their condition so that they can better be advocates for their own health. They can engage with me as part of their healthcare team. So hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound here. Some of you guys might have seen this video already. This is Danielle. She tells the story so well.
On Monday, June 5th, 2017, I felt the worst headache in my life. Like an ice pick driving through my skull. A CAT scan revealed a bleed in the side of my head, the size of a softball. The only option to stop the bleed was to have a craniotomy to remove it. Being completely out of control is terrifying.
It's difficult to talk to patients about brain surgery because it's very abstract. We're combining delivering difficult news about a scary diagnosis with the additional fear of not knowing what to expect and not being able to understand what it is I'm explaining to them. When we show them the model, when they fly inside their own brain, they can see the structure.
It's my dad. He made a cameo in this video.
They can see the aneurysm.
This device creates an experience for the patient where nothing is unknown anymore. I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't understand what they were trying to tell me because I had never physically seen a craniotomy before. It's so hard to wrap your head around what they're about to do. When I put on the goggles, my surgeon asked me if I was ready to fly. In the moments where they were telling me really terrifying things, I also felt a little bit of peace from the way that it was being presented. I was able to, in real time, see inside my brain. I was physically there with them, looking at exactly what they were trying to communicate.
Before surgical theater, preparing for surgery was literally me sitting over a cup of coffee, kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I
Damn, I'm
remember
old
that the
now.
optic nerve is here. But those preparations were a kind of ad lib. Now, with 360-degree 3D reconstructions, we're able to be inside that environment, which is as close to brain surgery as we can actually get without being there in the operating room. The advantage that the virtual planning and rehearsal brings to our readiness for surgery is the ability to simulate multiple different approaches. In a real patient, we don't get to try that more than once. We only get one shot at it. In the virtual model, we can do 2 plans, 3 plans, 5 plans, and see which one is the best for the individual patient. Make the bone look a little more like bone, so it's not translucent at first. Now that I can see the frontal sinus, I'm planning it, yeah. Bring in the microscope. When we're in the operating room and we get to the time of surgery, because we've done the preoperative rehearsal, it kind of feels like deja vu. Like, okay, I've been here before. I know where the important structures are going to be.
Sarah, here we are. We're coming up to the back of the tumor right here. This would be a good place to do an overlay.
This was during a real
Make the tumor
surgery.
more translucent.
I was at the hospital in the ICU for 10 days, and I had 2 angiograms, 2 MRIs, 2 CAT scans, and a craniotomy. I had a risk of having epileptic seizures for the rest of my life, not knowing that I'd ever be able to drive a car again, that I would ever be able to run again. But I would say the biggest testament to how everything went was the fact that I'm sitting here today. It was nothing short of a miracle. It made me more grateful for each and every moment that we have. We experience life in 3 dimensions. Why should our medical care be any different?
So I could explain all day long, but Danielle describes her experience as a patient, much better than I ever could. I think it's just off. I am not a social media person, but I have to point out that we got 1 million views on YouTube for this video after producing this. So yeah, that was pretty fun. Not expected. 2 other things. That Danielle's condition that she had with that size bleed, the mortality rate is 97%. So she had a 3% chance of living, and now she has 2 babies. Since this was 6 years ago, so now she's had 2 little kids. There's no greater reward for me than just knowing that. Actually, she, as a result of her experience, started a foundation called the Empower 360 Foundation, which is trying to advance the cause of virtual and augmented reality technology. And they actually endowed back Hoag, me, to support ongoing research. They give $1.5 million to support us being able to continue to develop these technologies and make them available for more patients. So it's the whole story together really just kind of reinforces that hopefully we're doing the right thing. So problem statement number 3. Traditional navigation systems, though, the way that we find our way around in surgery is a little more advanced than it was when in 1885. We have CT, MRI, and we have an ability to track those. But they require the surgeon to divert their attention away from the operative field. In other words, if we want to know where we are, I'm looking through the microscope and I put a little probe in, I have to stop the operation, look over here at a screen, and then figure out where that is and then go back to surgery. As we talked about, that interrupts flow. It's called context switching. When you're doing something and you have to look at your phone, it distracts you and you have to take a minute to go back to whatever it is you were doing. So I would, put your phones on do not disturb if you're doing something that you love or something that's important to you, because every time that happens, it interrupts your ability to get into that zone, to get into that flow state. And that's where, we all know it when we're there. It's like that's the part of life we love, is being in the zone if it's something you enjoy doing. So you guys probably have never driven with a map, but Rick and Chris and I have. It used to be when you got lost, we didn't have navigation. You'd have to stop, pull over, pull the map out, figure out where you are, figure out where you wanted to go, and then go back to driving. That's the way old school navigation used to be. We have these, again, black and white with an X and Y, and it would, you'd have to stop the operation in order to find your way. So about 6 years ago now, I had the idea to take these three-dimensional models that we use to practice surgery and rather than just using them for practice surgery, bring them into surgery and overlay them on the patient using augmented reality. So again, we took the technology that they were working on for the F-35 fighter pilot helmets to inject the image into the field of view of the pilots, and now we inject it into the field of view for surgery. So I had that idea. It was kind of a light bulb moment. I said, let's start doing this. We patented it. We prototyped it at Hoag. This is the first site in the world to ever do this. We took the idea from prototype to FDA clearance in just under 2 years. Just to give you background, that normally takes 7 years to get through that process. So it was an ongoing daily partnership between the physicians and the engineers. And this is the result. So the image on the left is very similar to the first case we showed, a tumor growing in the optic nerve. This is a 10 times magnification, so this whole screen is less than a square inch, is what we're looking at here. But if you look at this, you can see kind of where the tumor is, even though it's bright in here. You can't see where the optic nerve is. The optic nerve is buried in the tumor, and so is the carotid artery. With the step of a pedal, I can tap on the AR pedal, and then into my field of view, as I'm watching, I can operate with augmented reality with the heads-up display. So left optic nerve, right optic nerve, the green shell of the tumor, and then the sweeping course of the carotid artery, through the tumor. This and this is like night and day. You can't see where these structures are. And if I can't see where they are and I'm chipping away at them, if I cut the optic nerve, it's not like I can sew it back together. If I cut it, that's it, they're blind. It never ever will recover, that's game over. If I cut the carotid artery, there's a 95% chance they're gonna die. So knowing where they are, if I can't see them, it gives me what CNN quoted me as saying when we developed this technology and brought it through the government was, it gives me Superman vision, because I can see what I can't see, including what's yet to come in the surgery in front of me. So the ability to do this, to see through structures, going from the virtual reality model where I practiced the operation, got the exact corridor right, to now I'm in surgery, and again, it feels like deja vu. The same model is right there in front of me, now on top of the operative field, guiding my operation, and I'm bringing it in and out of the field as I need. So again, allowing us to get kind of stay in that zone by keeping my eyes on the ball, or in this case, on the tumor. So this is what that looks like in surgery when we use the technology. So I'm going to fast forward then. So this is the surface of the brain. We have planned out, let me see if I can back up a little bit. We've planned out how to get to this tumor, which is centrally located in the brain. This blue is a tumor located deep within the brain in a space called the ventricles. So any way that I go at that, if the head is a sphere, I'm going to be cutting through critical tissue. So this case, we used a port the size of a dime. So the diameter of this is the size of a dime. And we had to figure out how to get that port to the tumor in order to be able to take it out and not cut through critical tracks on the way. All in every direction there's critical pathways. So if I kind of go like this, so here the motor pathway here is in orange, the visual pathway here is in green. So I have to find the exact spot where I can enter the brain, and then also figure out how to target this to the tumor. Once I've planned that out in virtual reality, and this was like 2 or 3 hours of planning in VR, making sure I'm going to be able to dock it down on the tumor in the exact right location, then we take it out into the operating room, and we're able to remove the tumor using the same plan that I made before. Why am I having trouble with this? So if I kind of scroll through here, so we're bringing the augmented reality in and out here. So I turn the eyepiece off. This is the size of the screen here, again, is about a square inch. I'm cutting into one of the folds of the brain called the sulci. You can see when I turn the AR on and off, you can see the overlay as we see it during surgery. Now I'm docking, I'm introducing that port, and the ideal is if I can get this probe here exactly aligned with the red. So I'm about 1 millimeter off, you can see. I'm actually not doing it perfectly in this case, which ends up to be okay. We take the trocar, out of the center of the tube once it's docked down there, and now we're looking down this dime-sized port operating deep within the brain, and our ability to protect the structures. We bring the AR in and out during the operation, and you can see the tumor is a golf ball-sized tumor located deep down within the brain. And as I'm operating, the white there is the inside surface of the ventricles, or the fluid-filled space of the brain. So again, throughout the operation, I'm bringing the heads-up display in and out of my field so I can know where the target is, where the tumor is. Here I'm putting down little patties to protect the brain when I've already identified, okay, this is the interface between tumor and brain, that's normal brain. I'm slowly peeling the tumor away, and then checking myself back and forth with the AR, and then using the microscope. Again, this is about 10 times magnification that we use in order to take this out. So here I am peeling the last part of the tumor. There's the blood supply to the tumor, the little artery there. And then once I have dissected it all away from the walls or the inside walls of the brain, we're able to bring that out again through that dime-sized port. And again, this patient's cured now. They're taking the tumor out. We do a post-operative MRI to show to make sure we didn't damage those structures. So this is previously would have required a big open surgery, cutting through a big amount of brain, but because we were able to simulate the operation in advance and get the plan exactly right, this is a silver dollar-sized craniotomy, a post-operative image, and showing that turquoise blob in the center. You can see the cavity where it was is now gone. The optic pathway is maintained, the motor pathway is maintained, and the patient was neurologically normal. She went home on post-operative day 1 after surgery, and I just saw her back. This is 4 years ago now. She's totally normal and will stay that way. She's cured. Again, this is not about, I think it's more about the technology than surgical skills, and about recognizing when we have areas things that we don't know. And the more we believe that we don't know, the more that we can learn. So going from 1885, just to kind of wrap up, that first operation, drawing lines on the skull and then essentially knocking holes in there. 1987, MRI came online, so our ability to see inside, but then still giving us these two-dimensional images, and this in 2021 is how we plan and prepare for brain surgery now. And the amount of people involved in getting from here to here, Nobel Prize in physics for developing MRI, and medicine for developing the MRI, and moving towards our ability to simulate surgery on a patient-specific basis. We're continuing to evolve all the time, including every surgery I do now. The tech that's in the room makes notes about how to make the products and the technologies better. It's why I like working with small med tech companies, because they're agile and they want to improve their product. When you get to the big companies like Stryker and Medtronic and J&J, they produce a lot of products, and so the ship slows down as far as innovation. And it's much more enjoyable to be at the earlier aspects of it, because we can make a difference in how we take care of patients. So just to close the story, this guy that I used, patient number 1, that first tumor that we took out, that we changed the approach and as a result spared his vision. He was an artist, as I said, and he painted this 4x6 canvas for me that sits on my wall in my office. I was like, this is what I see every day when I'm sitting at my desk, reminding me of why it is that we do what we do and why it's important to always recheck our plans and make sure that what we're doing is the right thing for this patient. You don't ever want to be caught in a trap of kind of cookie cutter approach to stuff, because the more we can tailor precision medicine, precision surgery to the patients, then they're more likely to have good outcomes. So this was several years ago now. He has since passed away, but it's just a reminder of why I do what I do. And then just to finish up, this is another book by a neurosurgeon, another one that I like. Called Into the Magic Shop. And this book is about manifesting what you want in life. I was a kid, I had ADHD, didn't do that well in middle school, high school. I figured out how I learned, so I'm almost illiterate. I can barely read. So I learned that I had to learn by listening. So some of the kids in school would just never go to class and just be able to read and learn everything. I can't do that. I have to show up to every single class, and I'm there asking questions and listening. But when I figured that out, I went from like a B, C student to I graduated high school in 2 years. As a result of learning how I have to learn. So I finished high school when I was 15 and went to college. And everybody was telling me when I was, 6th grade, 7th grade, I was getting in trouble because I had ADHD and throwing spitballs at the kid next to me. And this is going to go on your permanent record, young man. I remember my mom saying that to me because my parents are both teachers. And it was just a matter of they didn't understand how I learn. And so finding something that you're passionate about and then understanding how it is your brain can link to that is, I think, the key to finding a career or something that you enjoy doing, and you're going to enjoy the things that you're good at. And so putting those two things together, James Doty talks about it. He talks about kind of these magic tricks. He's a little boy, and he has this woman teach her what she calls magic tricks. And it's really learning how to meditate, to calm the mind and body and put it in the right state in order to prepare for something. How to set goals, like with intention, not just like, yeah, maybe I'd like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro someday, but by the time I'm 30, I climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or I exercise every day. So there's a specific strategy to the way you set goals, whether it's a goal for the week or the year or your life. And there's a science to it. And when you can, in the end, the idea is when you can picture yourself in the position of the goal you've already achieved. Like one of my goals for retirement is I'm going to sail around the world. And I picture myself most days of the week, at least part of the, like some moment during the day, on that sailboat and like feel the wind on my face and like taste the salt in my mouth and imagining what it's like to have achieved that goal and be in the position of being there. The brain starts to program that into your life as if it's already happened. And it starts to not know that it hasn't already happened. There's this real science behind this. It sounds like magic, but this is the way the brain works. On the other side of it, we can manifest negative things. It's known that if a doctor tells you you're going to get cancer, you're significantly more likely to get cancer, all things equal, than if he hadn't told you that. So that's how powerful the mind-body connection is. And this is not surgery now. This is the power of the mind, the brain. This is a great book. It's easy to read. I highly recommend it if you guys get a chance. I mean, it takes like 2 hours. I had to listen to an audiobook, of course, but I showed the book here. I really recommend it. That's it, guys. We can take questions.